I've made up my ass. Twitch takes the longest, and it has trouble working. Oh, yes, it will break. Not much, chat. Just in the pre-show. What's up with you? How's vacay? Bam. I'm talking rights. Huh. Wonder if there's a way to stream this live to Twitch. Jesus. Man, Twitter's full of weird shit tonight. It's weird shit Twitter night. That's right, followers on Twitter, go. I'll worry about that in a week. Hey, it could be like 18.3 miles in the past 3 days. Boo! Boo walking that far. Boo! Boo to that. Boo to walking that many miles. Shit. I wonder if I can. Yeah, boo. No. Well, that's good for your heart. It's good for the heart. I was loving bombs today. Alright, just making my final tweets. Ask me anything. Yeah. Well, then I'll see you then, chat. I'll see you then. With bells on. I don't know. Tomorrow night's when I gotta do all my preparation. All that preparedness stuff. Yeah. Well, vacation. All I ever wanted. Vacation can't seem to get away. Vacation, going on vacation now. You know, if I do this just right, yeah, there we go. Now I'm in chill mode. I'm chill mode because I gotta do a bunch of driving Friday, so I'm gonna relax my body, get my brain ready. I hate driving. Worst form of transportation. Needs to be illegal. All of it. You drive in a shopping cart against the law, punishable by fines. Taken to the hog. Unless you're driving a train. I can get behind a good train. Mondstadt reputation, only 3 more levels to achieve. But it's all just grinding bounties and requests. Friday. Friday is the day I go on vacation and start my epic drive after a nice full day of work. Because work sucks. Yeah, brace for that. All right, 6 minutes, and we start the show. Let's start the show. Let's herp the derp. 9 more ley lines. Let's go. Only give me experience ones. Yeah, I feel that too. I know you feel that. Everybody's doing good. If you haven't figured it out, this time I happen to know chat on a personal level. They puked in my toilet. Yeah, I'm not doing that though. Yeah, you do know me. What do you think of that? I did do that. You have done that on numerous occasions. So don't act like a stranger. I keep hoping for Jesus to pop back up randomly one night on YouTube and be like, I know that guy, he sucks. Yeah, oh yeah, you've definitely puked in my sink. That's for certain. Wouldn't have it any other way. What are we doing here? 5 minutes. 5 minutes to start the show. Yeah. 5 minutes to start the show. Let's start the show. Let's start the show. Maybe I'll do it like Maybe I'll just do the whole episode like I'm in a drug PSA from the 90s. Slow down. You've been smoking too much marijuana. I'll just do that all episode. That'll be something people really enjoy listening to. Oh boy, this guy's thick. Jeez. Settle down, Big Papa. I don't have any lightning. These guys is all water. Yeah, come on, throw that at me. Got a meat cutter. Dude, take a break. Don't hurt yourself exercising. It's the obsessives problem. You know, they're not wrong when they say exercise is good for your body, but there is such a thing as too much. Yeah. When you start urinating blood, that's when you're like, maybe I've done a little too much. I should only do this for a little bit longer. I'm curious to see, is Cenk supposed to be on and supposed to provide his keen insights into rights? Yeah, that's another thing I know you've done in my house. There you are, big boy. Come on, let's wrestle. Won't you hug and kiss me? Won't you hug and kiss me? Bum bum ba dum bum, bum 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 bum. I was working in your movie, Mr. Weinstein, and that's when you came on to me. Do 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 do. The fact that you would not stop being real weird. Oh, and Cohen says hello there. Jesus. I'm gonna shout out from Mrs. Cohen. I might be a little worried. Oh, 1 minute to start the show. Let's start the show. Hey, I'm on here now, Dan. Awesome. Name Lord. Is that still Jesus? Anne is my wife, Anne Cohen. Who's on there? Who's on that? Who's on that sweet Twitch? I'll figure you out. I start seeing the questions roll. I probably won't. I know my dedicated fans. That's it. I will. I'll tell her you love her too, and that we'll have to fight it out over that statement. I want to confuse people as to who your identity is, just because. Policy and procedure. Jesus, I am Jesus. One Jesus or two? You just up in viewer count. You don't have to up viewer count. I don't care if tonight's Sons of Trier live stream slash podcast has no live viewers. I don't obsess over that. It's the art of the thing. It's Hegelian. Somebody's on Twitch. Hi, Twitch chat. YouTube chat's been lighting it up. Of course, that was all personal whiz biz. So, I'm Dan Cohen. I was supposed to be joined by a debate partner. But like anybody who challenges me to do a debate and then they read about half my work, they ran away. And if they decide to walk in here late, I'm doing both. If they decide to walk in here late, my stars. Bad news for them. So, let's muse a little bit on human rights. I did not listen to. So what has happened is this is being recorded and released out of sequence to some degree because I wanted to do a stream before I left for over a week. I'll miss you all, but yeah, you are. But Cenk has worked out a piece that I think he's going to be uploading about rights. To which, in that particular debate, I have a radical notion, but I will try to be as fair to his point as possible. So, let's start with a brief understanding of how we get to rights and what they are considered. I'm going to drink my iced tea while I do it. I'm going to hit his vape. That's what cool podcasters do. Drink Snapple and vape with off-brand vapes. So, and I am no historian by trade. I am a metaphysicist. And by day, I am a legalist. You would often call that a bureaucrat, but I have more powers than simply rubber stamping. I have the power to interpret within the context of administration. And I'll say no more, because I don't hand out advice. In fact, I don't even like to name where I work, but yeah. So this show would just become a fucking help column. It would get back to my bosses. And like all of you, I am a communist first and foremost out of resentment. I hate my boss. Legally, that's a joke. Professionally, that's a joke. But factually, I'll let you decide how serious that is. I don't know. Like most people, I really don't have strong feelings towards my own employer, but the concept of employment, the relationship, because of course mine's not engaged in bourgeoisie profit acquisition. It is the thing that maintains the bourgeois, if I were to be very technical. So it is a different beast altogether. But it is certainly under the purview of the bourgeois. Good evening, sorry I am late. You have no reason to apologize. I sprung this on you. Mostly because I was supposed to have a debate challenger. Ugh. And I'm just rambling to kill an hour because I can finally do a relaxed stream. I don't have to think so hard. So let's talk human rights. Let's start with what precedes right. Because, like the market, like, I don't know, democracy, these things precede the current form, right? These are not new ideas, these are very old ideas with a new formulation to arrive at them. And specifically, we're going to talk divine right, the divine right of kings. So, this is the idea. I always mix these two up, unfortunately, because I reject both pretty heavily, and we only see them reflected in the formation of the CEO. Um, oh, what's the other term? See, this is how you know I'm not a historian. I'm not on my A game. I bare bones. If I had a capture card, I'd be streaming Genshin Impact while doing this. Which is my next investment. You know, we can get some more patrons and finally have some money for tech. Dan will hit 2015 in terms of content. I'm old, leave me be. All right, so there's essentially two formations of monarchism, right? One's the divine right of kings. One is divine mandate, essentially. Okay. And in those two formations, now again, I apologize. I always forget which is which. By the way, good evening, you two. Always my two favorite fans who are not related to me, which is the only other fan I have. Um, and anytime you guys want airtime, let me know. Hit me up in them sweet DMs. You get that airtime. You can become podcasters. We do it as an act of love, a Hegelian act of love for the craft, and because we're bad at making money off of it. Um, woo. So under those two formations, essentially one formation is that the ruler, the monarch, the imperator, etc., pharaoh, whatever, that they're actually descendants of the divine, so their word carries the weight of divine law. In one of those formations, the right to rule is bestowed upon a ruler, and this endows them with the rights to govern as they see fit. Now, it's important to realize that for a very long time, that was more or less the most popular formation in history. You have very few competitive alternatives. Athenian democracy kind of works in a very similar manner. They still had a king, still had a divine heritage, but they did have, if memory serves me, periods or a constant democratic institution, but its purpose was limited. It was always limited, of course, to the ruling class and subordinate to it.
Do it.
Oh, you're here. God. You finally decide to show.
You live?
Yeah, oh yeah, we've been live.
Oh boy, we're live.
Yeah.
Fuck, we're live.
So, in response to this, if you're trying to combat the divine right and the divine mandate ideologically, you need a
Oh boy, we're
radically different
starting strong
formation.
here.
Yeah, not really. My history's bad. I'm playing Genshin Impact. I desperately need a capture card so we can stream this and I can do these talks that way. A little more freeform. I think I'm gonna start billing myself as the working man's philosopher. I think that's how we're gonna bill it. And you are my researchers. My subordinates.
Free labor.
Yeah, my free labor. Damn right. Interns, ho. You're getting paid when I'm getting paid, so.
Yeah, you got us there.
Yeah, you can't say free labor if I'm not paying myself either. So not certainly not profiting from the venture. Um, all right, so in response to this, the libertarians have a bit of a conundrum. They can't just accept the formation presented by the king. It's that joke I like to make. Why do we have to go out for oppression? We have oppression at home.
It's true.
There's nothing to do in that regard.
Where
So,
are we at? What are we talking about?
well, right now we're talking about how the formation of rights even occurs.
Oh,
And it's important to keep in mind the rights we operate under on a day to day and even discuss in radical left circles start here in liberalism.
are you listening
Proper
to my rant?
liberalism. No, I'm winging it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let me sort of summate the high what I feel is the high point of my rant for you.
Hold on. Well, do we have to? Because right this second, because I will yield the floor in a moment. I have to get to this.
All right, finish.
Chill,
Get
chill.
yourself off.
My ideal is a thinker in overalls. Eugene V. Debs, speaking of the working man's philosopher. Yeah, you know what though? If I remember right, Debs doesn't like white people, so 10 out of 10 on his part. I like Debs. Thank you, chat. But yeah, if I had some overalls, I definitely should try to. That's it. We got the YouTube content. We got there tonight. I'm gonna go buy a pair of overalls on vacation and filthy them up with some oil or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Any,
yeah, yeah.
anywho,
Listen, they're not real overalls if it's not covered in either grass or grease.
right, and I'll cover them in both just to be safe. I went from fixing the lawnmower to mowing the lawn. If I layer it right, it'll look perfect. All right, so the libertarians are then forced to come up with a radical alternative. Right? And this should not be surprising to anyone. They were a revolutionary class at one point. There's arguments that they are the only revolutionary class, but we're getting a real deep shit I don't really want to cover tonight and theorize on. Okay?
Okay.
That alternative notion that they are the only revolutionary class. So it is undeniable that the bourgeoisie were the revolutionary ones, right? They had to come up with an alternative formation on the grounds of economics, right? Because right now, if you're living under the divine mandate or divine right, all property is tied to the king. So whatever we would call capital now would still be the king's property, and there's limited alternative ownership in those societies. But those people making that money, not paying so much to the king and keeping it for themselves, they're starting to really like it. This new burgeoning merchant class. Okay, so they want to go whole hog and be the only owners. But you need some alternatives, right? You can't have God, the basis for the monarchy, as your foundation. You have to ground it in humanity. You have to have some sort of notion of how to share power, right? So you turn to good old Greek democracy, and you're going to have to combat in part. You have to combat the idea of the divine right, i.e., rights only handed out by the divine, especially if you're tying power to humanity. So you have to come up with egalitarianism, utilitarian decision making, the social contract, and you have to come up with a notion of individual rights. You have to have some way to dole out power and share power, at least on paper, with everybody, because that's the only way you're going to appeal. Right now, of course, if you're a monarchist of any stripe, you're pretty well set on just letting the king or the emperor do what they're doing and walking away. Right? In reality, depending on how far away you are from that monarch, they may not have that much control over your day to day life. You may live in a kind of a paradoxical anarchy, tied to the land, yet free of direct state sovereignty. Right? You're not constantly rubbing up against the sovereign. There's not much to think about. It's a king. He does what he does. You can just ignore it. And indeed, that is one of the proposed modes of anarchism, serfs without a master, right? If you want to be brutal about it, which I reject, but um,
Well, we reject anarchists here.
I
Those
don't
bastards.
look. I don't wholly hold them out of hand, but I'm going to tell you, I know what parts of liberalism they're keeping, and I reject it. That's why I'm not an anarchist. It's not.
Has anyone told John?
Oh, I liked when he quit anarchism the other day in chat. That was awesome.
it's it's okay. We only get to rip on him because he's not here.
Yeah, I'd rip on him to his face. You know that. Do you re- do you remember when he was still super identitarian and I started picking on him? He he used to be our intersectional good boy. Never missed a beat on intersectionality, even to the point of agreeing with liberal intersectionality, which is a cringe, cringe and a half. Anywho, so the liberal formation of rights in its most basic form is essentially that, as endowed by your creator, again, riffing off a divine right, instead of all that power going to a monarch, part of that power is given to you, and it's given to others. And the social contract, egalitarianism, and utilitarianism are the means by which we divide that power. Democracy is how we express that power, and we can form a cohesive society devoid of the tyrant. And it's still, I want to point this out because it's very important, and we consider it this way to this day, hence the term human rights. We consider those to be either natural or inborn in human bodies, okay, as a fundamental feature thereof. And before I start taking my positions, um, Cenk, why don't you go ahead and sum up that thing I'm not going to listen to for like a week?
Yeah. So I'm taking a different crack at it, and I was more inspired by your definition of whiteness.
Okay,
In
it's
all honesty, in that, what is whiteness, right? Whiteness is not, in fact, any definable thing. It is a lack of non-whiteness, correct?
right. It's a purity.
It's a purity,
And
and
honestly, just as a side note, that meme from the other day that listed Aryans as different than whites, that was telling. That was real telling.
yeah,
And
the
that's
I
about
mean,
what I think about the matter, to be honest. Like when you look at how they do their race science games,
I
that's
mean,
what
if
they
you just
mean.
let the dog whistles blow loud enough, it stops being a dog whistle, just starts being a regular whistle, as we know.
Yeah, and then when you put it against the bullhorn, everybody in town can hear it. No, but I mean, very honestly, that was accidentally both in part horrific and one of the most best representations of white supremacist theory. That
Yeah.
there is a
Well,
class of white beyond white, the Aryan, but then there's also whites.
as we discussed, there's a kernel of truth in everything, and while they've managed to fuck up almost everything, I think I found a little tiny kernel that they were building off of. So
Yeah,
I began my process with defining more so freedom, right? What is free? Who is free? Because we had discussed about, my question posed to you was, is Jeff Bezos free? And your answer was more so than most people,
yeah. It
which is
always
fair.
it always depends on what your definition of free is. If it's absolute freedom, nobody is free because I can't at will start fires with my brain. Nobody can
Right.
do that, no matter what they say. So there's no sense of absolute freedom. However, if we don't need to be absolute about freedom, there are plenty of people who are more or less free, right?
Right.
Um,
So, so I'm looking at freedom as a lack of fetterment of restriction. And there are more and less free choices, and this is not to be confused with good, right? So the right of a company to work children in mines is a freedom. They are free to do so if they
yeah,
are unfettered, but that does not equate itself to being good,
sure. So,
obviously.
so freedom without a moral analysis. We're just talking
Correct.
the abstraction. All right, let's do this.
So I started going off of that as that is the beginnings or the kernel of rights. And rights are freedoms that have an inordinate or a fundamental bar to clear to place restrictions on them. Something that is inordinately high, that we requires an inordinate high bar of proof to allow an application of restriction. So for example, freedom of speech has a very high bar of truth in my mind before you should begin to restrict it. It should cause actual damage. It should be causing actual damage before it's restricted. So obviously it's illegal to walk into a theater and yell fire, right?
Okay.
That is an inordinate bar. Like it has to be causing physical damage. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm pretty okay with even some pretty shitty things being free to be said.
Okay.
Not that I necessarily agree with them, but that's fundamental to the right, right?
Let's start here then. What, without conflating the two, what is your notion of freedom then?
My notion of freedom is a lack of imposed restrictions on decisions.
Okay.
And
So,
it's irrelevant to morality and it's also irrelevant to relevance, right? So am I free to make a choice between Coke and Pepsi? Yes. How relevant is the choice between Coke and Pepsi? Almost negligible.
okay, so yours is an operational definition.
Right.
Okay. All right. Now, and what's your definition of right then is, just to be formal?
To be as formal or as codified as I can, because this is the further we get away from this kernel of freedom, the less I've given it active thought, right?
All
But
right.
I think my operational definition here, as we're moving forward, is a right is a freedom that has an inordinate or high bar of proof needed to place a restriction on it. And I gave a number of reasons why I feel like something might have that inordinate or high bar of proof, right? And most of them deal with exactly what you would expect, right? They pose threats to the dominant socioeconomic force, and therefore have a propensity towards abuse. You know, it's really shitty whenever we see things like people's access to movement within a society to be restricted and people's rights to free speech restricted because those tend to lead to really shitty things.
So, just to kind of probe this a little bit, then, when you talk about restrictions of rights, are you only talking about at the super level, if you will, the super system, i.e., the system ruling body, whatever, in placing limits on rights, and then it's a free for all? Or are we talking about this as something that can be lost and acquired? Or are we talking about?
Yeah, I think it can definitely be lost and acquired. I think it's much more difficult to reacquire a lost right, and that's part of why I'm placing that inordinate bar on rights, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's very difficult to go back into a society that you have removed the right of free speech from and be like, yeah, this is okay now again.
Okay, and what?
If you're in charge of that political situation,
Sure, if you're the one who took it away and you hand it back, it's not really
it's not,
guaranteed.
yeah.
There's the threat was has always remained. Right, right. What are you defining as a restriction?
I was a little nebulous about that. Like, so for example, the conversation we had of like you have a choice between option X or death. Well, that's fundamentally a restriction, right? Because no rational decision making would ever result in personal death.
Well, I don't, okay, I don't know about that. There are reasons.
Rational.
There are
The
there are rational reasons for self-sacrifice, but I don't.
we're gonna leave the extremes out of the example just for the sake of the conversation. But
Sure,
yes,
there's
I
no
understand
common
what you
reason.
mean.
There's no reason to choose um, between Pepsi or death. There's no
Yes.
no
Right.
reason to make that choice. That's a pretty banal decision.
Might as
Sure.
well just take the Pepsi.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Okay. So for you, one of the restrictions cannot be that coercion is directly involved.
I mean, that is definitely a restriction. Like if you're being coerced into doing something, your choices are being restricted in some manner. It may be more or less than other things. So again, is the choice between the choice I have in soda is very free. It's not very relevant, but it's very free. There's a lot of different soda choices.
Sure.
The choice between healthcare options I have is very restricted. I've been coerced into being, you know, these three options within 50 miles of us that will not cause me to be financially indebted significantly.
Yeah, that's pretty. That as much as they talk about freedom in healthcare, there's not a whole hell of a lot of freedom in healthcare.
And I am free. I am free to go choose a different healthcare provider, but I've been coerced into
Right.
choosing the ones that are fiscally responsible. And that choice is more free than, for example, you don't have a choice. This is your healthcare provider, but it's definitely less free than like it's the same cost no matter where you go.
Okay. Do you see any other restrictions to freedom?
Why don't you just dig it up? Just
I'm asking.
push the plate in my face.
What? What? No, I'm asking your conception of it. How are you
Yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to
I mean,
formulate your thought if I'm
I'm
not asking you
sure
questions?
I'm sure I could envision other restrictions on freedom. I think you hit the vast majority of them by,
With just
limitation of choice and coercion and blah blah blah.
okay. Um,
And threats of violence.
Coercion, force, threats of violence. All right.
Which if we look at like police forces and things like that, we can consider those a threat of violence.
Yeah, we'd agree on that. Yeah, pretty
I
readily.
didn't think I didn't think I was saying anything too spicy for you.
No, what about do you envision any restrictions on free? Again, I think I'm playing very nicely tonight.
You
I
are. I'm
I
so proud of you.
yeah, I feel like you're
You're
now
treating me like a real human being. You've even let
yes,
me out of my cage for the day.
I have. See, now I feel like you're worried though that I'm about to drop some kind of 10-ton hammer or be an asshole. Um let's try to figure out a thought experiment where there could theoretically be uh a right that is denied one person or is at least severely impacted on one person's part and totally unencumbered on another person's part.
Oh, sure. Caste would definitely have an effect on that, right? Like we said, Jeffrey Bezos is going to have way more rights than I am.
Well, I'm actually thinking much smaller.
Okay.
All right, I agree with you. The cash problem is significant, right? You don't have the freedom to go to space. He does because he's a
Yes.
billionaire, and that's
I'd
how.
love to go to space. That sounds like a blast.
That's the that not for me. Not for me. I don't want to shit in the same suit I'm walking around in. That's not my bag. All right, no commentary on that. That one's just unchecked, huh? Lost,
I'm just leaving it.
lots of words for that. Okay, moving on. So I'll consider myself to have won on that point. Um, let's take let's take a dementia patient in a wheelchair. Okay,
Ooh.
and then let's compare it to the orderly providing care for them. Both of them want to drink right now. Who's freer than the other, if anybody? And how is that choice? I'm going to pull a John here.
and how is my choice
Ableist and transphobic.
ableist as shit
And racist.
and racist?
Why not? Add the
Just throwing
racism.
it on there. Why not?
Yeah. Oh. Hey, listen, man. If you
It's wait, which is the minority party in this situation?
yes is the answer.
Yes.
No, but genuinely speaking, like, who's freer than the other if both are left unchecked with the possibility of obtaining the drink, right?
I mean, obviously, the orderly has more mental faculty to do so,
And physical faculty. If you're constricted, if
and
you're
physical
if you're
factory.
constricted to a mobility device, as I cited a wheelchair, but any mobility device, right? The,
Right.
the the freedom to get up and go for a walk is one hell of a thing that isn't even contemplated, which is denied you. Maybe from a resulting of force, right? You could get shot and that could happen, but that can also just be natural. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so there are restrictions beyond external restrictions. There are very much individual restrictions on freedom by no choice of your own. You
Right.
wouldn't opt
Totally.
for that in any logical scenario. You wouldn't opt to be that hampered and in this scenario unfree.
Precisely. Again, in the same way that we treat, you wouldn't choose Pepsi death over Pepsi.
Right.
Excluding the extreme reductive factors, then yes, there's no reason to choose personal restriction.
Okay. So we have freedom is the ability to act unencumbered. Rights are a defining characteristic of freedom overall. What you're free and not free to do, right? That's how you arrive at defining that. Um, and restrictions can come. Well, they can come cosmically, right? They can come from physics itself. I can't just start levitating. They can come
Right.
from some sort of organization of force that says I will not be engaging in behavior. Presumably, the threat of losing multiple rights ex post facto, not before but after I engage the behavior, right?
Right.
Because you're not guilty until you've done the thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And there are also rights that are formulated entirely on individual circumstance.
Um.
Well,
Wait. Say
again,
that again.
rights formulated on individual circumstance, what you can and can't physically do,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What else you got? Keep going. I'm interested. What else? What else are you mulling around in your head?
I mean, that's the vast majority of it. Obviously, I have other obligations during the week that keep me mentally taxed and stressed. So
Yeah, I hear
I
that.
I attack this when possible. I got myself a little separate notebook for it. I try to devote some significant time to it in my week. That said,
Okay.
I mean that's the beginnings of it for sure is an attempt to respond to what is the organ that produces rights, basically.
Yeah. So, all right. So I go further on, right?
You
So
know,
if we.
your favorite response to me.
Yeah. Well, where is it? I still, it's weird that I can't get an answer to that question yet. I'm supposed to.
I'm sticking with the brain.
Got to go with these debates. The brain can the brain of its own volition get up and drink? Right? No, it has to coerce the arm and the leg. And if the arm and the leg don't go, the brain has no right to it.
Hmm. I mean, at what point does your brain just be its own unique thing? Are you just a brain in a jar? I'm not getting into this bullshit Matrix-esque
I
fucking.
don't have to go to the matrix. If I'm paralyzed from the waist down, my legs don't work no matter what my fucking brain thinks about the matter. No matter how much it wishes, demands, screams, gets angry, it doesn't matter. In that regard, the leg becomes a separate portion of the body with organs. It doesn't matter. There's no force of will. This isn't fucking Kill Bill. And the problem with disabled persons is not that they just don't try hard enough to make their legs work. Permanent
If only
nerve
they
damage.
tried harder.
Yeah, this isn't wiggle your big toe. This is not the result. This is just a sanguine fact. If the brain won't do it, excuse me, even if the brain wants it, if the body won't do it, it won't happen. Likewise, if I'm a dementia patient, my brain may not be able to conceive of it. My freedom may be limited at the organ you say causes rights. In which case, there is no dementia patient with any kind of freedom, right?
No, that's
Or
not
rights.
true. They just have less freedom than people without that reduction in freedom.
Sure. Okay.
In the same way that I have less freedom than Jeffrey Bezos to go to space.
Well, it wouldn't be the same way though. Just Bezos it has an external factor. His is actually monetary. His is the use of his rights to impede on others' rights, which has acquired him more rights.
I
In
mean,
in your case, you have done that less. You don't
it
even
is
exploit
fundamentally
anybody.
the same. It is fundamentally the same. It is stopping me from doing something.
It is both of them are stopping you from doing something, but I debate. I precisely disagree. It's not at all. It's not that your brain, in my formulation, is somehow inferior to Bezos's brain, which allowed him to acquire the money to go to space. I would contend that he used his brain for a very nefarious purpose, and our society rewards nefarious action. That's
I mean,
completely
again,
different. It's not about
it's
virtue.
not about that reduction does not have to be just brain based. It can be monetary based. In this case, it is.
In this instance, it is, but in other instances, again, I throw the dementia patient, the dementia problem does not cease to be a problem for this formulation of rights. This is what has to be scrutinized.
I don't think it's a problem for it though. I'm not convinced that it's a problem, I suppose.
I don't know how to convince you better. If the brain can't formulate the simple notion of I need to drink water to live, right?
No, I understand that that's a really shitty position to be put in.
That
I'm
this,
not here to pretend like it's not.
well, again, if the counter argument to my what my rhetorical trick of what organ produces rights is the brain, I will take you as having given me a serious answer, and I will treat it as a serious problem right back. If the brain doesn't function the way we expect a brain to function, are we then denied our rights? If we think of rights in this particular way, and it would seem
Who
so.
who is denying us our rights in that situation?
In that case, it's us. It's the brain.
Okay, then we are denying ourselves our right. I mean, I feel like this is I'm not certain that this is a compelling point or a relevant point, but I don't think that there's any fundamental difference. I don't think that there's a base fundamental difference between that reduction in freedom and, again, your reduction in an ability to start a fire spontaneously with your mind.
I would see that's the thing. I would say that's a dramatic difference because one of those things is the fundamental law of physics. One of those things is so okay.
Because in
In
both cases, you still can't do the
in
thing.
both cases, it is non-voluntary.
Yes,
In
that is the point.
in both cases, the outcome is the same. However, the cause on one is the external laws of the universe by which I am bound. Okay? That is a cosmic level force. I can't do those things because literally the universe says that's not how a human body behaves. There is no human body that has that spontaneous power. In the other instance, you have what would otherwise be devoid of the dementia, just another body with organs. So the body itself is the root cause of the denial of freedom. It is an individual and atomistic or monadist limitation imposed by the individual's own body.
Once again, thing A is occurring, and therefore thing B cannot occur.
Ah, that's not the formation though, is it? Because thing A, in the case of the pyrokinesis, is not an actual active force of the universe per se saying that. Those are just the fundamental laws of reality, if you will, the coding of reality. Although I feel like now I'm going to get a disingenuous blast of alternative reality brain in a jar, which is actually quite the opposite. Because you can't reprogram physics. That's a hard limiter. That's an external hard limiter of which all things are bound. It is a
Yeah, and
unifying force. This,
again, if
in,
we find a cure, if we develop a cure for dementia,
right?
then that limit does become less
That
in the
that,
same way that getting in a plane reduces that reduction on freedom for me to fly.
but it does not change your limitation of spontaneous flight because there is no cure for physics. If it can occur within that body, it will. In the case of the dementia, if it could, it may not. You see the difference? So the limiter here is the idea of individual choice being the problem instead of the sanguine fact of the universe. We are looking at freedom ultimately as a very small thing, right?
I mean, freedom is not a small thing, I don't think. No.
Right. I would
And
agree.
I think that I've given the definition that I've given gives a lot of breadth and a lot of space.
It appears to do so, but this is why I have trouble with the formation because ultimately it's reduced to a very individual thing.
I don't think it has to be individual. I think you're trying to make it individual.
I'm merely scrutinizing what you're giving me. If you didn't want me to come to that conclusion, you wouldn't have given me those inputs. We are now bound
That's
again by the grand laws of
that is
physics.
definitely that is definitely not true.
I'm only going where you're leading me. Why are we stuck
uh,
on starting fires with the brain? Um, ooh, new to chat. The reason we are is we are trying to demonstrate that some particular forms of what you could call freedom are entirely impossible within the body of physics, so that the idea of an absolute freedom or a divine freedom as experienced by man is impossible. That's why we are
I love how
stuck on
responsive
fires of
you
the
are.
brain. Yeah, I try. If chat's gonna bother to actually watch this awful garbage, then we owe them. We owe it to them. Because the difference is, this is something we would be doing essentially alone, in between talking about which magic cards are the best, or which jank uncommon we like. We just have a soft spots for. So yeah, um, that's why we're
The
stuck in
eternal
freedom.
blood-braid elf versus brainstorm argument. Here we go again.
I can love two things at once. That's my counter argument there. There's nothing better than blood. Yeah, there is a lot of things better than blood braiding into a brainstorm, but always it's always a satisfying play to draw three cards. Drawing three
um,
is fine. And on top of that
oh
card
man.
selection, what you draw one, you draw four cards and get to clean up two cards. That's 4 mana, certainly fine with me. I'm never going to look at that as a loss.
Oh man, we're getting derailed here.
Yeah, we are getting derailed. We're as free as we can be. I think we can go without getting so pissed at someone we start a new Holocaust. Not sure how to take that particular comment. Let me process that for a moment. We're as free as we can be. Are we, though? Bulletproof comrade, something, something, a hull breacher, something, something. Yeah, ah, that's the meme. Okay, so we're as free as we can be. Let's start there. Let's just take that idea. That's a very fatalistic notion of freedom, ultimately, isn't it? I don't know if you know this, but you stumbled into the communists. Just to be fair. So if you want to say something anti-communist and run, I don't actually begrudge you. I don't think you will, given the latter part of your comment, because you weren't like, then we get to. You're saying we can go without. But we're as free as we can be, right? That's a very fatalist notion. That's tied into the way capitalism wants you to think about capitalism, right? That I talked about this last week. Tina, there is no alternative. So the freedom we have is maximized within the system we have. Um, if I grant that to be true, we are either unfree in the sense that we can't pick a better system so we can be freer, or we are not as free as we could be because we're not opting to pick the better system. If we are as free as we can be, why would we need Marxism? Some sort of gotcha music. No, it's worth exploring, right? Because that's actually a very popular line of thought. If we on the left are going to take this stuff seriously, that's a line of thought that's ingratiated in a lot of people's thinking. Hell, I am doubtful that anybody in chat or sitting on this side of the podcast have not ever thought that before. We have to be able to envision beyond this limited freedom. Oh, I know I'm dating the one you're talking to right now. I think we're physically as free as we can be, but freedom per the way we live in the world, etc., we aren't as free. But per setting shit on fire, I think we're okay. Well, it doesn't have to be, of course. Okay, fine. You want another example? Spontaneous flight, telekinesis, thought reading, right? Which is something they're actually trying to tech into reality, which sounds horrible for reasons I'll get into when I
Oh
come off of
yeah,
my little hiatus. But
they are actually dealing with thought reading. That's like not that far away.
well, have you seen what they want to do with it though? They want to try to send the unencoded information, the sensory data, from one mind to another. That is the most
Huh.
horrifically stupid idea I've ever heard of.
Hmm.
How do,
I don't know. I'm gonna leave that. We're gonna get derailed on that real
we're
quickly.
going to get derailed on that right then. But
Yeah.
I'm dating the one you're talking to. Oh, is Lily Russell yours?
Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah. There's trouble.
He, Cenk here can't see the comments. We live
Mm.
in such a shitty cyberpunk reality. We really do. People thought dystopia was going to look cool. Dystopia doesn't look cool. Dystopia is very
Yeah, it
boring.
doesn't. It's really boring because it has to be boring, or otherwise people won't fucking stay within it.
Yeah. A minor note: telepathy is thought reading. Telekinesis is moving shit with your mind. Did I say it wrong? I thought I said telekinesis and mind movement or telepathy. I did it wrong. Whatever. My bad. But yeah, that's correct. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
if we're as free as we are right now, then the possibility of freedom is actually quite limited. And if you are an anarchist or Marxist, you reject that premise. You don't see it as free. Because what are the limiters on our freedom beyond simple physics, right? Anybody logically accepts simple physics as a line, right?
Right.
The human body of its own accord in its current evolution, could not start a fire with its mind. It could not spontaneously fly, cannot even levitate. Okay? Can't do it. Let's,
Right.
for a moment, I will go beyond the simple limits of physics, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Let me give you an alternative notion of where freedom comes from, though. I don't think it comes
Okay.
from
Hit
the
me with
act.
it. Let's go.
I don't think it comes from the individual. If I, how do I preface this properly? If I accept any remote version of a liberal notion of freedom,
Hmm.
I still have to reject that it comes essentially from the individual and what they can obtain through power. Okay? Because
Okay.
Jeff Bezos, for example, as an individual, can spend the money to throw himself into space and dick around there for a while, right?
Right.
And he can
And
all.
okay. Hang on. Let me pause that for 1 second so that I don't derail the train of thought too hard.
Mhm.
Mine is defined by individual power because
Right.
core to my definition, Jeff Bezos is more free than I am. Correct?
That is what I'm taking from you, and if I'm wrong, correct me now.
No, I was trying to figure out why it was correct, and that is why it is correct. Okay, let's continue on.
What you have done, and we talked about this before, is reification. Okay,
Okay.
and reification is a real fancy schmancy word, and I'm just going to break it down. It is conflating an object for a subject. Okay, if
I
I
do this all the time.
we do, we all do it all the time. I'll give you a great example of when we do it all the time. That's not even about politics. All right, when
Yep.
we talk about Tron decks, right? We talk about it as a
Yep.
Tron. We talk about it as if the deck pilots itself, right? Because
Sure.
it's so designed to be so efficient. If you mulligan properly, the deck will work the way you wanted it to, win or lose. It's like a Necropotence deck, right?
Yep.
But what Jeff Bezos here is comparable to the idea of a Necropotence deck. We have to separate the individual subject Jeff Bezos from your formulation, the object Jeff Bezos. Okay, that sounds really confusing, but when you have a Necropotence deck, what are the things that go into a Necropotence deck? Right, number one, Necropotence. When you have a Tron deck, what goes into Tron? The Tron lands. Some human being has to pick those up and put them together in that assemblage to create the deck. Correct?
Mhm.
Now, some human being
Yeah.
will take that to a tournament and play that deck. At some point, Jeff Bezos has accrued money through his actions. And this is critical. It's through his actions operating within the framework of our society. So sticking with the Magic analogy, right? We have we know right now the Tron deck is built by someone and piloted by someone. Could be the same someone, could be someone's teammate, right? Or friend. Right? Yeah, you can
Yeah.
just let you borrow Tron, tell you how
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do it.
Totally.
Sure. What in what framework does a Tron deck actually matter? A Tron deck isn't really that terrifying on its own, is it? Why does a Tron deck become a terrifying or a nightmare or a giant headache, or depending on your deck build, a joke? What
Yeah.
defines it as those
So,
things?
so there's a couple of rules that define it as that for sure, right? One, the person you're with has to also be playing Magic the Gathering.
Right.
That they have to be participant within the game.
There has to be another participant, doesn't there? Just in that
Yes.
example, just for the game itself to take place.
Yeah.
Even if it's just at a kitchen table, there has to be two people. You're not playing a game of Magic. You're just fishbowling a deck.
Right.
It's not as terrifying in that form. I don't care if
No.
there are 80 million Tron decks when I'm playing Jund. I only care about the ones I'm facing down. Because now they've gone from the object of a Tron deck to the subjective pilot of the deck piloting a Tron deck. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So the context of Jeff
Uh,
Bezos isn't Jeff Bezos. The context of Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos has enough money.
to do whatever the fuck Jeff Bezos
Thank
wants
you.
to do.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what a Tron deck is for this person. Did I just drop back into an MTG analogy? Amazing. You did. You absolutely did. It's a way to relate things, right? But just like the Magic the Gathering competition, we'll call the kitchen table a competition, has to be between two participants. And you can play Magic only just with two decks and running around the table. Sure, but I'm still not wrong. You have two decks fighting each other because you have one human piloting two decks. You have somebody taking a social action. In this case, the
Yeah.
active piloting of the deck. So I'm still right. Just in the
That's
same
true.
way.
The choice has to be made ultimately.
People have to. Somebody has to make those choices for that deck.
Yeah.
Somebody has to make the decisions. They have to make the proper set of decisions within the framework of the social context of the Magic the Gathering game. Just like Jeff Bezos has to make a certain set of social decisions so that he can acquire more money than he has, so he can amass so much money that eventually he pays other people to build his rocket and other people to put him into space. He didn't
Yeah.
put himself into space. The mythology, the reification occurs when we treat Jeff Bezos as a divine object that put himself into space. Jeff Bezos didn't put himself into space. Jeff Bezos actually stole an incredible amount of labor from other people in the form in a value form we call money. And he spent that money to pay other people to put his ass into space. So that's the difference. The power doesn't come from Jeff Bezos. The power comes from the social relationships that support the existence of a Jeff Bezos. So when you say we're only as free as we can be, there's an unequal amount of freedoms. Jeff Bezos has more freedom than I do. You do. Cenk does. Amended and bulletproof. More freedom than all of us. Why? Why? Because the social relationships at play define freedom. Freedom can't come from the individual. Freedom comes from the actions of an individual with other individuals. That's how you
So
arrive at the freedom. And that's significantly different than it being an inert thing within
you want
an
me picking up
object inside the
the
subject.
cast side of you want me picking up the cast side of that a little bit more then. That's what you're so like the social caste relationship between, upper lower caste, upper lower groups, freedom comes from the power dynamic. Is that what you're saying?
Freedom comes from social interactions. How those actions play out determine the level of freedom you're at in any given action, right? When you go to the store, you want to buy something. If the clerk kicks you out, you have no freedom to purchase. If the clerk doesn't kick you out, you have freedom to purchase, right?
Sure.
Simple enough. It's not
Yep.
that you, of your own individual right, went and purchased. It's that within the context of a store, there's a set of social interactions that are normally in play. The store clerk has the power to kick you out or permit you to purchase. At that point, if permission to purchase is granted, you have the freedom to purchase. If you're under the age of 21, those purchases are restricted. If you're above the age of 21, they're not restricted, right?
As much.
Nearly as much. Yet I can't walk into a store that will operate for very long and buy an RPG and a child porno, right? That's probably a good thing, we would say. That restriction on freedom is good, but it's undeniable. You really can't have a store operating like that for too long. There's going to
You
be an
clearly
external
haven't been
force.
to a gun show in Western Pennsylvania.
No, there's no child porn there. No child
That's
porn.
what you think.
I haven't seen any. I've only been to one gun show, but I haven't seen any there, so I'm going to presume that those people are on the up and up otherwise.
I mean, it's a lot of libertarians. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, but they're not selling it. See, they're keeping it on their phone and trading it through WhatsApp then.
You got me there.
Right? Now, granted, I do have to say, because we brought in the CP word, I am, of course, against that particular type of commodity, right? Because of the sickening
Obviously.
nature of the human labor involved in it, i.e., what you're doing to these children. But it's simply true. We have restrictions on freedom that come from a national level and a state level and a local level at that point. Check the gun cases. All right, touche. You find the right libertarian, you might find something you didn't want to find. And you got a problem on your hands. But the point is we have a restriction on freedom there, but if I go into Sheets, I can pretty much buy anything in Sheets, can't I?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense. You
yeah,
you personally, yeah,
yeah.
totally.
And there's a social context for that set of purchases. That's what we mustn't forget. And even if you just limit yourself to that, that's an awful lot of complex social interactions, isn't it? Because I can change what I'm purchasing. If I take your Coke versus Pepsi as some kind of freedom, sure is. There's a lot of choices in there I can make. But the ultimate overarching theme is still the social situation of purchasing from a store, going to market and buying. Doesn't really
Okay.
matter what I'm buying at that point. So that's where I do take a minor issue there when you say Coke versus Pepsi. I have the freedom to pick between the two. It's irrelevant. You're purchasing. You're just buying.
Well,
And you have to
I
have a
did
social
concede.
framework to buy within.
I did concede that while the personal freedom was very high in that choice, the relevancy was very low.
Yeah, well, I will say that the product is totally irrelevant because, of course, the restriction on freedom then that comes, for example, from the South, right?
I
A
think
couple of decades back, you weren't allowed to purchase in certain stores if you looked a certain way, were you?
PepsiCo and Coca-Cola Co. would disagree that that choice is relevant, but I think they're about the only ones.
Yes. So would RC Call. Their competitors would.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You know what I mean.
I do. Um, but we even forget in the act of having the magic card, right? How did the magic card get into our hands? Somebody had to put it in a package, right? At some point, at the creation from the factory, somebody moved it from the printing press, that factory. I'll use the shorthand for factory since it's the site of production. They have to create the card and they have to move it, right? So a trucker has to move it. A trucker moves it and it goes to a distributor. The distributor has to put it where it's going to go, and then it goes to the store. And then you bought it at the store. There's a whole set of human hands involved beyond simply the act of purchase in that social situation. There's a whole network of social interactions that give you that freedom. Pardon my burp.
Yes.
I've been drinking
Freedoms are
iced tea
very
like a fiend.
complicated. Ooh.
It really is that complicated, though. That's the thing. What has to happen before all of that, right? What has to happen
Yes, I
before all of
agreed.
that?
They were complicated.
You have ink, you have cardboard, you have that cellophane sealant. You know,
I mean, if you want to get real like bullshitty, you have to have all the concepts to the cards invented, everything like that, the
yeah.
language around it.
Let's do that. Yeah, you laugh, but it's important to remember that there are people who sat down and thought about what that card was going to say, how it was going to be written, how it was going to be marketed, right? When it was going to be
Right.
spoiled. All sorts of decisions go into your freedom of simply buying a magic card. So your freedom is never produced by you. Your freedom is always contextual within the society you're in.
Okay.
That's my counter argument. It is based upon the series of interactions. Now, in our society currently, again, we're as free as we can be. I can more or less agree with that kind of a statement from chat, right? But the problem is, as a Marxist, I propose, are we actually as free as we ought to be or could be? We as free as we are, certainly, but are we as free as we could be? Right? We can set up these social interactions differently. But we have to overcome, in my eyes, the idea that freedom is something inert and innate, and that you can lose it just from being born. Right?
Mm. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's my qualm. Now,
It's a cohesive argument.
yeah. Well, it's a counter argument.
Yeah.
That's really the point. Once you overcome, in my eyes, right? Once you overcome that hurdle and the horizon is open to you, simultaneously you are gifted with an incredible amount of anger because you're like, I'm really getting fucked over here. But you can also be gifted a large amount of hope, right?
Sure.
And let's take an example from the libertarian revolutions that we would say is good and actually does objectively overall increase freedom, something that as a communist or even an anarchist would want to emulate, right? Can we think of anything like that? I would take right
That
off the
overall.
bat, if you were to compare the Giza pyramid to an apartment building, a well-built apartment building as they were once upon a time, now that we're letting our infrastructure die, not so much, but a well-built and well-maintained apartment building I find to be far more impressive than anything than the ancient wonders of the world. Yet we're supposed to reify those objects as a type of greatness that we've fallen from, right?
Right, but it's the apartment building's so much more helpful, useful, does so much more good.
How many more freedoms do you have because you live inside than outside? How many more
Yeah.
freedoms do you have on that premise alone? The Great Pyramids did nothing for freedom. They did nothing to increase the quality of life. Sure, you can argue they were jobs, but if you were homeless and you had that job in ancient Egypt, you were really shit out of luck.
Yeah.
Didn't matter. You're getting paid. Who gives a shit about that? You still got to fight in the fucking desert to eat. Nah. A good, well-built apartment building is a far more impressive feat, and we wouldn't have had that. We could not have possibly had that without the act of industrialization, which gives us the ability to factory produce many things simultaneously. How many social relations can you pump out at a factory versus at the artisan, right?
Sure.
So many more. And that summation of
Yeah.
human labor in those social relations gives us more freedom and it improves our quality of life. Now, Obviously, I put the caveat on there because the problem with capitalism is it isn't profitable to maintain what you have built. It is far more profitable to let it wither and die and replace it with the new. And what are we experiencing in housing? Withering and dying so that the land can be repurposed and a new one can be built to let wither and die so that we can artificially extend the concept of profit. There is no incentive to maintain it. So when you're in these one crumbling structures, if we were to use the Miami incident in this way, the problem
Ugh.
there is the profit motive killed a shit ton of people. Suddenly those social relations turn very negative. They don't have freedom no more. That was stolen
Ooh.
from them.
Ooh, I did have a section talking about this on my ranting. So specifically, I brought up the need for government or social rule in that point literally, in the points where capital being involved is morally abhorrent to not just the communists who feel like it's morally abhorrent no matter what, but but
We don't
everyone.
we don't have a moral our critique isn't moral. When you see communists making a moral critique and a moral assertion, they either haven't done the homework and they're not there yet, but we reject it on a lot more than just mere morality, more
I'm
than
being a shit.
taste. I know
I
you're
am
being
being
a
a
shit.
shit.
But I want to make it clear.
I
There's a
I will
productivity
freely admit
reason.
I'm being a shit.
Well, there's a productivity if you measure that abstract productivity in human capacity, you get more out of a communist society. You are more profitable in different ways, if you will. You are more profitable in the potential to create and the ability to maintain freedom. It's not about the acquisition of money on a scoreboard, as we're currently experiencing with Musk and Bezos and Branson and all those assholes.
Right.
Lily, you are correct. He is always a shit, but I love this little shit to death. You see, you guys never get to see it. We should do a behind the scenes when we are just hanging out and bullshitting entirely without, thought for the microphone. The relationship is so much different. Yeah, he's pretty great. I agree. As long as you're not
God.
stealing from the show, you're okay in my book. I'm gonna have a problem if I lose my foil. We really should do
uh,
that one night. We'll just have to. Well, I don't know. We'll play Magic or something and stream it.
oh yeah, that might not be a bad idea. We're always looking for something new, right?
Yeah, why not? Oh, don't test me. I was here first.
What? I don't know what's happening. I'm just going to assume it's good for me.
Razzing your lady. I'm starting a piss fight. Yeah, but that's where now. See, that's and I'm here last. What's your point? Fi, fi, honestly, if we were using libertarianism for a moment, my point would be the fact that I found it first. I have original claim, and that my courts will back me up in that claim. That's my point.
All right, you two knock it off.
Okay, I'll stop fighting.
You two knock it off.
Anywho,
All
yeah.
right. So yeah. Okay. I like the social definition for freedom. I can work with that. Uh, I still feel like I can figure out a way to be right. I got to be smarter one day. One day.
Um, as far as that goes, like I said, it's the problem is you're always what you're going to rub into immediately is reification. If you formulate it as individual and innate, and there are complications to that beyond what I've presented. Okay, and part of that's just because I didn't prepare. I'm kind of doing this off the cuff.
I
But
mean, yeah. I mean, how many times have we had this conversation?
right, and if you wanted me to present those kind of things, right? If you look at the Tina philosophy, the underside of that is there is no society. That's the other side of Margaret Thatcher's formulation. There is no alternative to capitalism and liberal democracy, and there is no such thing as a society. That's all bullshit. That's all fictions, right? You're just made up. You're just a collection of atomized monads bumping around into each other, right? And the problem there is, have you seen? Well, sure you've seen this, right? Look at the MAGA morons who are out there flipping out right now because their assertion of their individual right not to take the vaccine is getting them kicked out of places. because
Oh, that's
they,
great.
yeah, I mean that's the problem with your formation of it. There's no resolution to that because you have two individuals who are rubbing up against each other, and it becomes purely a power formation to overcome it. In this case, the power of the shopkeep over the consumer, right? But in a societal situation, the resolution is that because you are opting to actively harm society, there is a social consequence to it. That is somebody else is using
Now,
their right and
in
exercising
my
it.
defense,
Yeah,
I left room for that. It was literally the last thing I talked about. I said it was the most nebulous. I specifically said that there is room there in that definition for a right to be something that either causes or is for the net positive benefit for society to be a necessary thing. I'm very leery of that because I obviously a bad faith argument can be very easily made of like, oh yeah, well, prevention of abortions is a net positive for society,
right.
right? And obviously that math has panned out that it's not the case, but there are parties in this country that would argue otherwise.
Well, if you have an individualistic view of society, they're correct. If you view society,
Uh,
it is because what are you doing? You're literally preventing somebody from ever having the possibility of rights by nipping them before they have personhood. That's abhorrent, right?
I mean,
So if
you're
you
not if you don't define a clump of cells as a person.
no, well, I said before they're even human, before they even gain the capacity to have rights, you're nipping the bud of the possibility. If you
And
have,
that trade-off is from the individualistic rights of another individual as well. So like
but then what do you
this
have?
is very,
But then what do you have?
you know,
You have a non-voluntary, non-euthanasia execution that isn't a murder. That's what you have. That's why when
it's a
the,
really spicy definition. I don't know.
well, it's not.
I'm not sold on this. I think that you can have permission for abortion and an individualistic view of human rights.
You can because you have murderers is what I'm saying. Yes, you can because somebody can choose to be a murderer. You validate their argument if you see it that way. That's one of my qualms with it because if you have an innate individualistic view of freedom, like divine blessing view almost, it's not your formation isn't quite the same, but it's not a stretch to say it's endowed by the creator. If it's endowed by the creator, then every human being has what's the prima facie right? The right to life. So unless
It is
that
a that is a disingenuous argument,
it's
and
not
you
a
know that.
disingenuous audience. I'm literally I'm just what you're saying when you say that is my argument is disingenuous. I'm giving you, see, that's where you're stripping the credit from yourself, frankly. I'm giving you your credit. The problem is, if you view the human body as a piece of property only, and you view yourself as having individual rights innately, then an abortion is just a murder. It is not a medical procedure done between two consenting adults. It is not done to save somebody. At best, you can argue that it is a murder committed to save somebody else, which is filthy utilitarianism, which I despise. You
I do
have
love me
to,
some utilitarianism.
if you conflate those things, right? If you don't view freedom as an active social set of obligations, if you view it as innate to the individual, then all abortion is just murder. We don't even need the word abortion at that point. We're just committing a murder, right? But then we have a society that permits murder or doesn't permit murder. And the sales pitch becomes very easy. So we have to reject on the ground of a slew of rights. The most obvious is, of course, a woman's right to control her own body, her own property. If we use the property definition, which I'm also loath to do, because that separates the individual from themselves and turns that meat into just a set of things that they own. Disgusting. And we're getting into disgusting shit because it's a disgust.
Yeah,
I hate it.
you're spicy enough. Yes.
Yeah, but it's important it be said. We don't say it enough. We don't work out why they're wrong, right? Or we don't self-critique enough to say why are we wrong. So why I was wrong as a progressive, right? Why do I feel that somebody like Kyle Kalinske, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, all these people have an incomplete view of freedom, right? Why would I make that very spicy claim? It's because they believe in innate individual rights. But the problem is if you believe in innate individual rights, one of those things that comes up is that Sorry, abortion really is just a murder because you're preventing somebody from ever accessing their rights. That's what you're doing.
All right, you've given me my homework for the week. I've got to figure out why you're wrong.
I guarantee you can't. Right? You can just
I
say, "Oh,
mean,
you're disingenuous." I'm not being disingenuous, unfortunately. I'm taking your points and applying them to a real world scenario. I'm not arguing from the abstract anymore. And when we do that, we validate the anti-abortion people, which I'm again 100% certain nobody on this podcast and nobody listening to this podcast wants to do. But if we see freedom coming from social relations, what do you have validation for then? You have validation for a separate distinction between an act of murder and an act of abortion. An abortion is just a medical procedure. The murder is the execution of one person by the other, which denies them their rights as a person. If we have an innate view of it, every clump of cells, right? Those clump of cells will gestate into a human being. So they have a presumption of a right to life. And if we accept that definition, then there's no way walking out of it is one person ending another person's right to life and a third person making the decision to do so and ask somebody to execute it for money. It's a paid hit.
all right. Obviously, Ben Shapiro is actively wrong here, so
Ben
we'll
Shapiro is
figure that
actively wrong.
out.
Ben Shapiro is actively wrong. Number one, Ben Shapiro couldn't do what I just did. Okay? Ben Shapiro couldn't actually provide you with a definition of why it's murder. He's dumb. He'll just say you're killing a person and walk away and then cite science. Because he's a very dull little boy.
No, he's
I,
not. He's got an excellent train collection. Don't be like that.
I, I will say this before we end up, because we're about to hit an hour and a half. We may as well just go on the even hour and a half. I'm glad I'm no longer a fascist, because I really can do their job better than they can. I really could. I just
My
did it
skill
better
as
than
a
them.
fascist just makes it so much worse for them.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. As a former fascist myself, it's embarrassing to watch what I used to think was smart. Embarrassment, shame is a powerful motivator. That's what I'm saying. We're too quick on the left to get rid of shame, but without shame, I wouldn't be here decrying the faux brilliance of Ben Shapiro. And again, if you look at his argument is literally going to be this. Even if you don't look at it from a religious perspective, the problem is that according to science, that's a person. And if it's a person, it's a murder. Wow.
What a shit.
What that's not what a smart person says. You see how I had to do the homework? You see how long that took to do the homework to make their case for them and then reject it? Even if we cut it off before I reject it, let's say I was sick in the head and I accepted it, right? At least there's some kind of homework involved where you could say the infringement of this particular decision is outweighed by the fact that that is a human life and we can't murder people, right? We can make a utilitarian choice as to which one's better. See why I hate utilitarian decisions? See why I hate them? They're terrible.
They're sometimes necessary.
Between Coke and Pepsi, they're great. the,
Coke and
the
Pepsi.
amount of utils between your preference between Coke and Pepsi is a fine way to apply utilitarianism. Just like, are you going to masturbate, play video games, or bother to go to work today? Which is the highest utility in this moment? That's all well and good. But Dr. Pepper.
Sometimes it is the video games.
Yeah. But the problem is once we start applying utilitarianism to actual things, utilitarianism gets real grotesque real quick because it's about reducing real world political decision making into a filthy cost benefit analysis. And there are ways
Thank,
to arbitrate
thank
those
God
things.
we don't do that in real life.
We do that one all the time. Again, how do they
Ah,
arrive at
damn it.
abortion as murder?
Damn it.
Yeah. No, it's disgusting shit. I hate it. And fuck Ben Shapiro. Fuck that little asshole. Fuck him. It takes so. The problem is he's at a level of fucking just banal stupidity, unoriginal thinking, and intellectual laziness that it actually does require a fucking professional to come in and debunk him. Not because a normal person has rational faculties and an intelligence level capable of having a reasoned debate about these things. Your average off the street person is smarter than Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has the trick of talking quickly and saying so many stupid things rapidly that It took a fucking hour to fucking debunk it of what the problem is with it.
I took drugs and now my brain goes 10 times faster than normal people's. Does that make me smarter? No,
Yeah,
it just makes me dumb 10 times faster.
I'm dumber than the speed of light. This is another reason I reject the anarchist idea of rejecting the word dumb because Ben Shapiro is professionally stupid. They pay him to be that dumb in public. That's paid, right?
They
He's
should
getting a
pay him
lot of
less.
money to be that dumb. And
I'd
to
do it a lot cheaper.
yeah, frankly, yes, I could be him for cheap
I could I could be a lot cheaper.
and smarter. But you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to demonstrate that utility because that would be horrific. Even though I would be getting paid then. I'm getting mad
You
paid.
gotta say. Well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Let me chew on that. That's a good thing to sort of set me off for the next week.
Yeah, if you're married to the idea of freedom and rights, your basis for them is stronger if you base them in society because the things you like then line up. If
Hmm.
you base them in individualism and especially individual utilitarianism, the right is correct. That's what we're rejecting, if you will, by being on the left. We're rejecting their definitions of it. So we have to supplant and think about our own and have something to offer instead. So if you're married to that notion of freedom and rights, the way to define those is through society, not through the innate individual. Because again, going all the way back, the dementia patient then is less free by age, and somebody who's born with severe cognitive impairments is less free by birth. And that doesn't necessarily make much sense because
I mean, it's
what that
true.
what that it's not. I reject that that's true. I reject that that's truth because what that allows you to do then is that allows you to exercise even more force upon those people. And that's how you create all sorts of slurs. That's how you manufacture abuse. That's how you
That doesn't make it
permit it.
right to execute more force on those
But
people.
again, it's not a moral decision, is it? It's a utilitarian decision made by an individual or a set of individuals acting in concert that it becomes permissible, which is the problem in our society. It's not morally right to blow up people in Afghanistan. It's not morally right to encourage fucking crackdowns across the world. But we're doing that anyway because it has utilitarian value. It doesn't matter that it's morally right. Morals are about the last thing that ever matters. Ethics, baby. Go beyond good and evil, but arrive at ethical principles. Don't arrive at the beyond man or the overman.
Listen, I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta get myself to a Home Depot to buy a single piece of lumber so I can do a photo shoot and make $1 million. Um,
Yeah, you got to drive about 120 miles an hour so you can cross the time zone.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
you've caught me.
Yeah.
And
Facts,
and then
logic,
I
and
really
reason.
just gotta go. I've gotta go complain about the fact that my wife might have a leaky pussy.
Yeah. Well,
It's
the fact
about
that
the.
I have to go brag about the fact I can't get hard and she can't get wet from me not getting hard, and I
Oh
have to act
God.
like everybody else is the problem. Again, individual
I
utility run amok.
I love ripping on Ben Shapiro. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Can we do
Hmm.
that more? Can that just be the whole point of the podcast?
No, but I will point out if you want, I will do more for just for you. If you can find a Ben Shapiro clip where you feel in your gut he's particularly stupid and you want me to rip him apart, sure. All I ask is you make it
uh,
5 minutes or less because I don't want the show to be 3 hours.
all right, fair enough.
I will.
I'll find my favorite for next week.
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of people with moist vaginas. Ben Shapiro. Correct. His wife's pussy is so dry her queefs sound like whooping cough.
Oh God, I
Oh,
can't.
okay. All right.
Uh,
So,
okay,
Jake, you're running the show Friday?
yeah, that's the plan, I suppose.
All right. So
The sun's a tree here.
I won't be here this Friday or next because I'm going to be out of town, heading down south to an undisclosed
operating
location.
operating a secret cabal.
Well, I'm
What was
finally going to
the
do
what
it.
was the name? What was the name of that thing you like? The operational decision making.
Oh,
Project fucking
What the fuck was that?
Lightspeed or NetForce or
I fucking Project Cybersyn.
Cybersyn. There you go.
Hmm.
You're trying to generate your own Project Cybersyn down in a Carolina.
You know what's happening down there? There's actually going to be a little bit of a terrorist convention. I'm going to pick which terrorist group I'm joining. I don't know if I'm going
Ooh.
to join Hezbollah, the candy of God's warriors, right?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
don't know if I'm
I'm
going to
telling
join.
you, Bisis all the way, man.
Yeah, ISIS for bisexuals. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
BISIS. I'm
Bisis.
I don't know if I meet all the qualifications to get in that one, but they are the coolest.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I
Or
mean, they go both ways.
I rejected joining Al Qaeda, but find the Westboro Baptist Church. They count, right? Um, They are a silly group of people. They're very fun. They're accidentally very fun people to look at. Like if you put them in a zoo and let them do their thing with the signs telling you you're all evil and going to hell and you're all gay or whatever, that would be a funny thing to do as like avant-garde art. So on that level, I appreciate them.
I mean, it's very rare that someone manages to unite both the left and the right in this country
Yeah, into
in
giggling.
just absolute detest of the individual.
Right. You could form. I think you could start. If you wanted a good, if you really wanted the Red Brown alliance, the legendary Red Brown, right, the Spectre of Doom, you would start with loving animals and hating the Westboro Baptist Church as part of your
Yeah.
planks and ripping on them. That's what you'd do.
Yeah, you'd get a good portion of the country with those two
Hmm.
things. You're
Loving
you're spot
animals,
on
95%. That's how you know Pete is a CIA op. I say that all the time, but
because they fucking hate animals.
because PETA manages to make other people hate fucking animals. It's the single unifying thing of
PETA
the country.
manages to make other people hate animals.
Yeah, PETA makes the old Maddox. Do you remember the best page in the universe? The reason
What's that?
it's this really old website from one of these crank libertarians on the internet. I fucking what's his name? He calls himself Maddox on the internet. But the premise to it, one of his articles, for every animal you don't eat, I'm going to eat three out of spite. That's the kind of shit. That's the kind of comedy or social satire or commentary that PETA fucking inspired. I just literally nobody hates animals, and yet PETA finds a way to make you hate animals. Total CIA.
Yeah, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah. Hey, stick around for a moment. I just want to review
Yep, not
everything
a
with you.
problem.
But all right, good night, gang. I will see you. I will not be here for the 30th or the 6th, so I will try to see you around the 10th or the 11th. We'll have more fun
Love
then.
you, America.
Love you. Don't die, please.
Don't die. Do good
Let
things.
let Arkansas clean itself up if you catch my drift.
That's Pirate Kansas right there.
Yeah, Pirate Kansas. All right, night.
Nah.